It's just gone 7:15. Now, it has never been harder to find an early years childcare place. That's the stark warning from one charity, which says thousands of providers have closed in the last year alone.
Yes, it's the Early Years Alliance saying this, and what they're claiming is that rising costs are wreaking havoc for many nurseries, and they warn it will get even worse without significant investment. Navte Johal reports from one nursery as it closes its doors for good.
Time to say goodbye. This nursery in Southampton has been here for more than 20 years. It's beloved by the local community, something that is clear on the day it closes its doors for the final time.
Emotional. That's the only word for it, emotional, because it's all come to an end.
Especially like when you're on your own as a mum, when you go home and you've got the teachers here for support, it is really hard.
This raw emotion is a result of hard economic realities. Nearly all of the parents of the children at YMCA Weston Park Nursery and Preschool make use of government-funded free childcare. But that funding has not increased in line with recent rising costs.
The cost of living has gone up. Everything has increased, our overheads have increased, and unfortunately that funding amount has remained the same, and so that means that we are just in a deficit. We should not be having to close our doors, and we should not be leaving children without provision, but we are. That is the sad fact, is that is what's happened.
The parents' pain at the closure is punctuated with worry about what comes next. Around half of them haven't been able to find another preschool for their children in this part of the city.
Round here is awful, like everybody seems to be booked. There's not enough preschools around here to get him in, so I'm going to have to go further afield.
And even some are rung up, there's no availability till September 2024, and that's over a year away.
Well, it is understandably an emotional day here, but this scenario of nurseries and childcare settings closing is not uncommon across the country right now. In fact, here in Southampton alone, on the day that this nursery is closing, there are 2 others also permanently shutting their doors at the same time.
And one leading charity says rising costs, recruitment issues and lack of funding has created an unprecedented situation.
I won't mince my words. Let me be absolutely clear. I have never witnessed such a difficult time for parents to find a place for their child, and it will not get better. This will get considerably worse unless there is adequate investment. Don't make promises to parents that the sector cannot fulfill. You have to invest in the sector. Make sure the infrastructure is strong, but it has never been this bad.
In a statement, the Department for Education says it recognises the financial pressures faced by parents and providers. It says it's spent more than £20 billion over the past 5 years to support families with the cost of childcare and provided unprecedented support to protect all businesses from high energy prices. But it's not been enough to save this nursery.
It doesn't serve a purpose to be really sad right now. I'm just trying to see it as a real positive that we've managed to make such a difference and we've impacted these families in such a positive way. The reaction is just incredible.
Navte Johal, BBC News, Southampton.
Well, we're joined now by Elaine Sagar, who runs nurseries here in Greater Manchester, and also by Neil Leitch from the Early Years Alliance. Elaine, none of this comes as a surprise to you?
Absolutely not.
How, if you can quantify the increases in your expenses over the past couple of years?
Well, minimum wage alone has gone up since 2017 by 29%, and the government have given us a maximum of 4%, so there's no match.
And just to explain to people who might think if you get your 15 hours or 30 hours free, you're topping that up.
That word. The government are paying us at least a minimum of £1 less than what it costs us to run those hours.
Which is why some nurseries don't accept vouchers, do they? Because it's too expensive.
I think you have to accept the 30 hours childcare. I really can't use the free word. You have to accept that, because otherwise the children that have been with you right the way from birth are having to move, and that's unfair on their welfare and unfair on the parents that are entitled to it.
Neil, let's bring you in from the Early Years Alliance. You brought these figures out today. I mean, the government has told us, you know, they're putting 20 billion in over the last 5 years to support the cost of childcare. The spending review is putting more money in year on year. This year, another £180 million. Is that money not finding its way to where it needs to be?
Well, it's a very misleading statement. I mean, to just make a statement that says we put this much money in is not really the question. The question is, are you adequately investing? And government knows that it isn't. This is quite an important point. Back in December of 2018, frankly, when we were tired of hearing statements that were similar to that one, we said, well, if you think you put enough money into the so-called, as Elaine says, she's finding it difficult to use the word, but the free childcare entitlements, show us your figures, give us your computations. They told us to go away. It took us 2.5 years of battling to get them to release that information, only through the Information Commissioner's office. Very reluctant. When we got that information, it said, their words, not mine, to adequately fund these entitlements would require an additional £2 billion per year. They predicted that figure. They were only paying 3.6 billion approximately into the system. So you can see there is a massive shortfall. They also said, and again, this is really important, that by 2021, we would have to pay an hourly rate for a 3 and 4 year old to the sector of £7.49. What did they pay? £4.89. So they know that they are shortchanging the sector, and they also know that parents are making up the difference. So it is a disingenuous, basically, statement, full stop. There's no value.
How many nurseries do you think are going to go out of business? Not necessarily the number, but what percentage of all the nurseries and childcare providers are likely to go out of business?
Well, in our recent survey, I have to say that we had around 30% of providers who were very concerned as to whether they could survive, full stop. What I will tell you is this, is that we have seen in the last 12 months record closures. Nearly 5,500 providers have closed their doors. As well as representing 14,000 members, we're a charitable organisation. I have to say that we also operate early year settings exclusively in areas of deprivation where they are desperately needed. We operate 60 settings today. This time, 3.5, 4 years ago, we operated 132. So this isn't just cheap talk. This is happening.
The thing is, though, Neil, we're at a crunch point, aren't we, where we have nurses, junior doctors who rarely go on strike, teachers all saying, we need a slice of the pie. Businesses have to charge a little bit extra. Elaine's going to have to do it. It's up to those organisations to make sure they cut their cloth accordingly and, if needs be, put fees up.
You can't continually put fees up. We have used up every bit of margin. The fact that we have been neglected, frankly, for decades means there is no room for manoeuvre. Government predicted, again, I come back to this point, in 2021, that there was about a 20% shortfall in funding, at least. How can you apply that to parents who are already struggling? I come back to this point. Don't make promises to parents just because you want votes and then basically ignore how you deliver those promises, because that's what we have. And there is no margin left, full stop.
Elaine, you're going to lose £61,000 this year, I think.
That's just on one of my nurseries.
On one of them. Does that put the future of your nurseries in doubt?
No, it doesn't, because we've got a really strong cash flow. We're going to weather that. But as Neil said, what we didn't want to do was put the prices up again before September for our parents.
There's a perception, it's a number of years since my children went through nursery, decade or more. But there was a perception certainly then, and maybe this was me that had the perception, that the people who run the nurseries actually make quite a lot of money.
The government have taken that off us with the funded childcare. I think you'll find that a lot of nursery owners now are operating second jobs just to pay themselves because they can't take any money out of the nursery.
Right.
What we're hearing in lots of carers' careers and nurse people who work in nurseries, a sort of part of that is that people are looking for alternative pathways for their career because they're thinking this just doesn't pay the money for how hard the job is.
Absolutely, we're losing a lot of staff. There's a recruitment crisis, as you know, and that's because a lot of them are going to work in supermarkets. Why wouldn't they? They get £11 an hour for a much, much easier job than what they're doing protecting the welfare of children.
What are you saying to your parents about September?
Fees will be going up.
And that's at a time when households
absolutely,
are
at a time when we wouldn't want to
squeeze.
do that, but unfortunately we have no choice.
And the collateral damage in part of that is sometimes parents thinking it's not worth me going back to work.
That's what's happening, isn't it? There's going to be, as Neil said, there's going to be a further loss of childcare this year. I know in Greater Manchester alone we're talking figures of up to 50% of childcare going.
That's an impossible. I mean,
how are parents going to work? You know, who's going to look after their children? Because without that infrastructure, parents can't work.
Thank you very much for coming to talk to us.
Welcome.
Elaine Sagar, we're very grateful. And Neil, thank you for your input as well. Neil Leitch from the Early Years Alliance.
It's 26 minutes past 7.